Mr. Johnson, Mr. Gist, Kay, Mayor. Cheap seats, Mayor. Say them the cheap seats back there, the town tops. Any comments, Mayor? Want to close out?
Trey, there was no comments from there?
No, just, I guess the only thing is that if the public has any questions, they can send them to the council.
What is that email address? Do we have it right there?
City Council.
At
The City Council at
cityofalec.com.
City Council at City of Alexandria.
No.
Alec.
City of Alec. CIT.
Again, it will be scrolled across the screen. Let's get it clarified here. It's City Council at City of Alec.com.
For those who aren't from Alexandria or just moved,
Yeah.
Alec is A-L-E-X.
Like Kate.
City of Alec.
That's C. Mayor Roy.
The only thing that I would add, and I think that until Harry spoke, everything was going fine. I would just tell you this. We talked about it extensively on the radio. I would tell people to go and listen, get a tape for KSYL this morning and listen to questions being answered. And just remind folks, just the basics. Your bill has two parts. It has a fuel cost aspect, and it has the electricity rate aspect. These gentlemen set the rate. The fuel cost is what all of this has been about. It's been about a pass-through to the city that we just pass back on to you. We don't add anything to it. It's passed on as a bundle from Cleco. We have to partially unbundle it and send it to you. So the question is, we contended something was wrong with that pass-through when it came to us, and when it got passed on to you, we contend something happened in that exchange. That's what it's been about. We get asked very often, and I noted in the paper today, there was an article, the editorial was, "Sales deal has power to hide the truth." And I read with some degree of interest this opinion today. And it concludes at the end that really, I believe it has somewhat of a conclusion that these gentlemen aren't doing their job unless basically you go to court. And so I want to remind all of you of a couple of things in making that decision. And you saw them in the slides. If the value that you achieve in an agreement is close to or even greater than judgment value, not settlement value. Remember, that article makes sense if it says that you're trading horses, if you will, right? You're doing a deal and you say, man, we have a lot to risk if we go to court. If we go to court, we could risk losing, so let's take less than what we think it's worth. But it's a very different scenario, ladies and gentlemen, if your experts tell you that the value you're achieving is really equal to or even greater than what you think you could do on your best day. That's a very different scenario. Now, people will have a lot of questions, and you heard some of the comments. Why would somebody do that then? I'll leave that to you to answer why somebody would pay that much value. That's something maybe for another day. But the question is, do these gentlemen have an obligation to address that with you? What is their obligation as public officials to achieve? Is it in the search of truth to risk it all, risk maybe nothing, and go to court, or is it to achieve this value that their experts have told them that they've done? And I would ask you to think about that. No one is suggesting to you today from the council or the administration that the process you just went through is enough to educate you on what to do with any value. No one is telling you that. No one is saying what should happen. You saw that those were carved out, the issue of rebates, fees, all of that. So no one up here, I believe, is telling you today that this process that we just started is enough to educate you on what to do if that choice is made and you receive this value. That's I think, for another day. I think what they're telling you today and what this process has been about is, did the city achieve the right value? And then, as Mr. LaCour pointed out, what are you doing to unbundle that information and show us what you did to achieve that number? And that's where we are today. And so that's what I think Sybil's question was. We kind of got a little off track there, where if you're saying it's all moot, not at all. It's just the opposite. But you have to do these in pieces. It's the old chicken and the egg, and it's the old don't count your chickens before they hatch. Right now you have to decide if this process is achieving a value that makes sense, and that's something you want. On one of the slides you saw a little snaky graph. There were two, one above each other.
That's what I asked you to go over that one.
And I wanted to point out that what that meant, that top graph, and that difference being the value that you could receive. And in this case, we say that value is around 60 million or better on this graph. It's important to note that this top one, which represents the current agreement or the existing agreement, is not the value that we've been fighting over. What we charge your experts that you pay for to do is figure out how this contract should have been interpreted in the way that would be in our best interest. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, right? If you're just minusing one from the other and you're doing it in a way that we already alleged was being done wrong, and Cleco fights that and they say they didn't do wrong. But we asked them to analyze it assuming that we were right on our bones of contention. And that's where you get, if you want to assign one of them as Y and one of them as X, and you do X minus Y, whichever way you need to do it, you're going to get the third number. We'll call that number Z. What we're ensuring is that this and this, that difference, is that value that we're telling you. And where we got the value was asking our experts to tell us what is the best case scenario if you slam dunk this. Now, rarely is that done in a courtroom. I'm going to suggest to you it's even rarer done when it's allegations that revolve on intent and proving intent. But if this were really, as the Town Talk opinion suggested, horse trading your dollars because there was a whole lot of risk for the city's end, and we just thought, let's cut it in half. And I recommended that to Mr. Lawson, or Mr. Lawson recommended that to his peers. You would really have to pause and think, should we just go to court and see what it's all about? But if it's not that, if our experts convince them, and I'm not saying we're all there yet. I know everybody thinks it's a fait accompli. I'm telling you it's not. We're all still thinking about things. I think that. I can't speak for the councilman, but
that's correct.
If that's the case, and they come to a point that they know there's no greater value that they could get, well, some people would say it would be foolish to go to court and risk losing it all if you got 100% of the value up front. And that's what I think gets missed sometimes on talk radio and other places. It's that it's not a settlement. Usually when you settle a case, right, there's a car accident, you settle somewhere in the middle. If you walked in the settlement room and they said, look, we can pay you full value, everything you want right now, would you go to court? You wouldn't. And so that's what we have to see. Did we achieve that? And then you have to have folks that are like Mr. LaCour that will ask you, if you have proof, show how you got to that point. Now, there is another side.
Explain it, and I know you get to it, from the council, make sure that we clearly articulate to the public, and I think you certainly touched on it fairly well, like the 60 million,
Okay.
29.
I'm going to defer some of that to Mike and Chuck Johnson, but I want to point out, it is not lost on the administration or the council or any of you in this room, I'm sure, that there's a moral component to things. Some people feel very strongly that regardless of what you do in this, people have a right to know the truth, and these allegations are serious. The problem with that is, I don't think anyone disagrees with that, but there's only one way to have that cast, one way or another, and that's in front of a judge or a jury. Only the judge or jury can do that. You see, a settlement cuts that process off. That's the whole point of it. And so you just need to think through those things and think about cost-benefit analysis. What do we do that's in the best interest of the citizens at this point? And I think that there are legitimate reasons that someone would say the truth should always just come out and be the truth. But if you put in the catches, the new audit rights and all those things, and if you're getting the value that your experts tell you pay for, that you could never get more, then you really just need to know, at least initially, all right, tell me how the experts know that, and prove to me that they've got that maximum value. The rest of it becomes sort of a logic equation that makes a lot of sense. And that's where we are right now. The 60 million is a number that came about through a lot of analysis, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Marcotte and Mr. Chuck Johnson, and I will yield to any other questions that anybody has. Thank you for allowing me to place that to record.
I think Mr. Johnson had a question first, and then we're going to go to the 60 quoting.
The $60 million question.
$60 million question, that's right.
I think one thing that's important in all this discussion for the general public at large is listening to what we're saying here tonight, and I would like to thank the mayor for his discussion, is that under the cost of natural gas, the public is in tune to this agreement and lowering utility bills. I think, at large, when the general public looks through all of this, how will this help with my utility bill? I think if y'all could further explain that, you've done a great job in your further discussions as you lead to the $60 million.
I think that's a good question, Mr. Johnson. I think those two are actually, it's actually interrelated. If you don't mind me, I'll back up a little bit. If we go back to our current supply diversity, we have 10 megawatts of hydro, 55 megawatts of solid fuel coal power, which comes from Rotomaker 2, and a balance currently comes from market purchases through Cleco that is 100% of that 63% comes from natural gas-fired units. That's where the variability comes in. As that natural gas market rises and falls, 2/3 of our electric fuel